sitting here like everybody else. So I appreciate everybody for coming. What we're going to look at today is where we're at in the overall uh, kind of game of OT ICS cybersecurity, why it's important, and really where we are in the threat landscape today. And so. Uh, Real quickly, everything we're going to talk about is for educational purposes only. Everything that we share is from me, myself, and I. It's not affiliated with the company I work for in my day job or other organizations that I'm affiliated with. So, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Mike Holcomb. I'm the fellow for cybersecurity at Fluor. If you're not familiar with Fluor, we're one of the world's largest engineering and construction companies. So we build some of the world's largest OT or ICS environments. There's very few companies globally that can do what Fluor does, and I get to work with some of the most brilliant engineering minds that exist today, which is a real privilege. I also lead the control systems, we call it, or the ICS OT cybersecurity program as well. So I did found B-Sides Greenville locally, and then we have B-Sides ICS now with, I think, 8 global uh, uh, conferences next year, which is really exciting to see. So you can find us at bsidesics.org for more information. Um, you see, I have a ton of certifications. I got my master's through SANS. We probably will talk a little bit about them. And then most people know me from either LinkedIn or YouTube, where I post about OT, ICS, cybersecurity. And whether you're trying to get into the field, whether you work in a large environment and you're working on maturing your program, or everything in between. Some of the projects that I've worked on in the real world. So just to give you a little bit of idea that I do work in the field from time to time. And so I did want to start off with a conversation about, and this goes back to January of 2024. So, so it's almost 2 years ago, where Russian state adversaries had gotten into essentially the organization that maintains these apartment buildings in the Ukraine. And they used a real simple piece of malware to make changes to these controllers, which shut off heating for 600 apartment buildings for 2 days. And it was a very simple attack, and yet it had very significant impact, right? Imagine if you were one of those people in one of those 600 apartment buildings. Again, not 600 apartments, but 600 apartment buildings in the middle of winter, sub-zero temperatures outside. And so I like to talk about that as an example because, again, it was a very simple attack and that had a real world impact. Now, going back to 2017, I like to tell this story as well. So 2017 is when we had what we call the Trisis incident. Some people refer to it as Trident. The idea is that the Russian state adversaries had gained access to the complete entire OT network at a petrochemical facility in the Middle East. And in this facility, like most industrial OT environments, you have a SIS, or what they call a safety instrumented systems. This is the fail-safe backup to the plant. So it enforces safety in a number of different mechanisms, but ultimately the idea is that if it ever detects a fault condition, that it can shut down the plant safely. And in 2017, it was found that attackers had compromised the SIS. Now, they were found out because the SIS had tripped, and the operators of the plant called in the vendor. The vendor came in and said, "This is not us. Somebody has, changed your firmware. You need to bring in, some cybersecurity experts," and they brought in their own folks. It's a Aramco facility, so they brought in some Aramco folks. They brought in Mandiant, folks at Dragos, and others eventually got involved as well. And what it turned out was, the attackers had almost full, complete control over that SIS. And Rob Leodragos always, he always very emphatic about stressing that the only reason an attacker would take control over SIS is to kill people. And so there are easily 12 different ways that you could have done it in that plant, mostly by causing an explosion. There's a lot of concern we had, but it was a near miss, right? Thankfully, that there was an explosion. No one was hurt. No one was, killed, and we found out about the issue, and were able to secure that facility. Now, why I wanted to talk about Trisis back in 2017 is that there's an idea that this could have also potentially been a cause for an explosion at a petrochemical facility here in the United States last year. Now, I have to say, there's no evidence that proves that it is. There's just a lot of, say, circumstantial evidence. And this will speak to a couple of things that we're going to talk about in the rest of the presentation. But the idea is that that same attack group, which is known as sandworm, that some of you might be familiar with because they're the most prolific out in the public attack group in the OT ICS world. And they're Russian, so you can imagine most of their attacks are against their adversaries in Ukraine. The same group Dragos was tracking, trying to break into this petrochemical facility in the United States for about six weeks. And then there was an explosion. And now with the explosion, the idea was the CEO came out and said that the explosion was caused by the SIS, remember the safety instrumented system, by it tripping, which we did see in the 2017 Trisis incident, right? So strong coincidence at least. And at the same time, the CEO also said that there was no sign of cyber attack. And we're seeing this play out a lot, especially today, even though we've seen a couple of major explosions at other facilities here in the United States, in Russia as well. And there's a lot of concern with, is this a cyber attack or not? Like in this instance, right, last year in the United States, there was a lot of circumstantial evidence. The CEO can come out and say, well, there's no evidence of cyber attack. The problem is they weren't doing any network security monitoring. They weren't doing any security monitoring. So if you're not doing security monitoring, how would you know if it was a cyber attack or not? You wouldn't. You wouldn't. And that's, some of the questions now we're asking today in a lot of these incidents that we occur is it a cyber attack or not? Like, we don't know. Only about 5% of OT organizations at a global level will actually do network security monitoring. And I would say even half of those are probably not doing a very good job. So there's very few environments that are actually doing a good job at monitoring their OT networks for sign of attack. It's a big problem. And then there's a lot of incidents that are happening that they look like they could have been a cyber attack. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. We don't know, but we have to prepare to protect our environments regardless. And so at the end of the day, does it matter, whether it was a cyber attack or not? I would love to know. Are we ever going to know? Maybe, maybe not. Probably not. But we don't have to look any further today than Jaguar Land Rover and what's going on there, where you have a complete massive failure by the organization to protect its manufacturing plants. And people can argue that, well, this is an attack against their IT networks, or it wasn't an attack against the OT networks. Well, you know what? OT is down. You're not manufacturing anything. And I don't necessarily personally care if someone can't buy a new Jaguar or a new Land Rover. But what I do care about is the now almost 200,000 people that have their jobs at risk. which is a staggering number when you think of not only the employees at Jaguar Land Rover, where manufacturing has been down for already a month, and some of their plants they're talking about could be another month or two before they come online. I saw one article out of the UK that talked about indefinitely. Or when we start talking about the suppliers that provide parts to Jaguar and Land Rover to make their cars. So many of them are already on the brink of financial disaster, and all those employees would no longer have jobs, and their families would no longer have paychecks. And there's no excuse for this. And I was just reading another article that was talking about, well, and all the the local economies, the communities that are built up around these plants. Think of all the restaurants and the say bars, but the pubs and all the other kind of services that are built up around these plants. They're already seeing a downturn in business from 30 to 50%. And most of those are small, medium-sized businesses that they can't take this hit. All because the company that owns Jaguar and Land Rover could not protect these plants appropriately. And there's no reason, there's no excuse for this to have ever happened, let alone they didn't have cybersecurity insurance. Wow. But again, I don't necessarily care if you can't go and buy a new Jaguar or Land Rover, but I do care about those potentially upwards of 200,000 people. And that doesn't include the community's impact, but those 200,000 people that could be out of a job. That just pisses me off, honestly, because there is no excuse. It's not hard to protect OT. Now, have you seen, and it's usually a lot easier when I do this in in person, and I can't see the chat when I'm talking either. But I did. There's a movie that some of you might be familiar with, especially if you're probably over 30. This was an American movie that came out in 1995. So this was 15 years before the first known attack against OT environments, which was Stuxnet. This was called Hackers, and so Hackers was a movie I think well ahead of its time because a lot of what it focused on was attacks against systems that controlled things in the real world. Well, when we talk about having systems that control things out in the real world, right? That's where we're talking about OT or ICS. And so it's really what we're going to talk about in the rest of this presentation, kind of where we're at today. Obviously, when we look at things like JLR, we're losing. And people don't seem to grasp or understand that. Now, some people say AI is going to save us, and AI, like anything, like any tool, right? It can be used by the defenders for good and can act as a force multiplier. I use it a lot. I actually use it because I thought this was really cool to put myself in this picture. And it looked actually really good. I'm not that short compared to some of the other folks, but I think you get the idea. I'm like, yeah, that's really good. And of course, Gen AI is getting better and better every single day. But it also causes a lot of problems too. Because here's another picture that I wanted to put myself in, and this is what I got. Right. And it's like this really simple cut and paste, and it does not look like I belong there. And it's really bad. I think that it really tells, to where Gen AI is today. It's really good at some things. It's getting better every day, but also make some really silly mistakes. And whether we're using it as the defenders or remember, attackers have access to Gen AI as well. And they don't have any rules that they're playing by. And they've been using it much longer than most defenders. There's still a lot of defenders not using it at all and only following that much further behind. So when you talk about, so why are we here? Why do I post on LinkedIn and YouTube about OT and ICS cybersecurity? The idea is the number of attacks targeting OT and the IT networks that they're connected to, right, is only increasing. Right? And the impact of those attacks is only continuing to increase. And we're not ready. Again, obviously Jaguar and Land Rover were not ready. And they're owned by a company that has significant resources. So there's no excuse. You have to think the vast majority of OT or ICS environments out there, though, they don't have significant resources. They have very few resources. The majority of OT environments today, right, they're small, medium-sized businesses. They're never going to have somebody dedicated to OT cybersecurity. They don't have somebody for IT cybersecurity. They don't probably have even anybody for IT full time, and they call in consultants when they need to on a very like unique case by case basis. The vast majority of OT environments out there are very small. It's a medium size, and again, they'll never have the resources to get the latest and greatest shiny tools off the shelf. Because if we look at, and this is kind of a timeline of significant cybersecurity incidents in the OT or ICS world that have taken place over time. The idea is that it was years between attacks. I didn't get interested in OT cybersecurity until 2010 when Stuxnet was announced. Now, I've been in IT cybersecurity for 30 plus years, but I didn't even know like this OT or ICS thing was there when we didn't even call it OT back then. It was ICS and SCADA. And I did actually have an idea, but honestly, I didn't get interested in it until Stuxnet. But you can see that we went years without significant incidents occurring. Again, there's sure a few other things that occurred in here, but overall, if you were following the space like I was, nothing was happening. Honestly, part of 2025 was kind of quiet to a large degree. But in 2021, and you can see by the timeline, right, all of a sudden with 2021, we saw now just a constant stream of attacks that impact OT environments. Again, whether they target OT or the IT networks that they're connected to, we have a steady stream since Colonial Pipeline, because that was with Colonial Pipeline, that was when the largest gasoline pipeline in the United States was taken offline for 10 days. So where I live in the United States, you would go to the gas station and there was no gas. Now you could go around the corner and there was gas, but you had to wait in a really long line. And by the time you got up to the front, there might not be any gas. So this is a real world impact that people saw. So we knew that incident occurred, right? There are a lot of incidents that happen that if the public doesn't notice, then we don't end up finding out about those attacks. In 2021 with Colonial Pipeline, not only did the public and these owners of these environments and the people that run them, the operators, start to understand they needed to do something about cybersecurity, but then the attackers also realized they needed to do something about targeting OT or ICS environments. Because up till 2021, the vast majority of attacks were caused by state adversaries. Russia, China, the United States, Israel. And worry about hacktivists and ransomware operators and other types of cyber criminals or script kiddies. They weren't looking at OT or ICS. Colonial Pipeline changed that because Colonial Pipeline was caused by a ransomware group out of Russia. I think they're just trying to target every environment they could. They just happened to get into an environment that was connected to the largest gasoline pipeline in the United States. Oops. And ever a constant stream to where, yeah, we see Jaguar Land Rover today, which again, there's no reason for this to have happened. Every environment is going to get compromised. No question about that. And if you get compromised with ransomware and IT or OT, the average downtime is 7 to 10 days. You know what? We accept that. If you have the basic controls in place and you're able to recover. Obviously, JLR is really struggling because they have some massive failures. So 2021 and moving forward, right? The number of attacks is increasing to the point where we're just seeing more and more. Again, first half of 2025 started was kind of quiet, relatively speaking, as far as especially number of incidents with high impact. But we're definitely seeing that change in the last half for sure. We're making up for lost time. In fact, I need to update this with. I actually do have an updated version with JLR and one other incident on there. We're not prepared. We're not. I can tell you, I work for some of the largest companies in the world: Saudi Aramco, Shell, Exxon, Conoco, right? And they invest significantly in their programs. They're prepared. But like we mentioned, the vast majority of OT ICS environments out there, they don't have those resources. You don't have to also spend a ton of money either to prepare. This is why JLR really just upsets me so much because attackers are out there and they are targeting everything. They're targeting every single critical infrastructure sector there are. Now, these are the 16 that are defined by the United States government. Everybody's government is slightly different, but at the end of the day, you get the idea. We're covering OT and ICS, especially those that provide services that are critical to us living our daily lives. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter where we live. We just want to make sure our families and our friends and our communities have what they need in their daily lives and that they're safe. We see, do we have electricity when we flip on the light switch? Do we have clean water to flush a toilet or to drink or take a shower? Do we have clean and safe food to put on the table to eat? All of these can be impacted by attacks. Manufacturing, by far, is the number one type of OT or ICS environment that's targeted today. 70% of attacks go towards manufacturing. Now, if that manufacturer, manufactures tennis balls, I'm probably not as much worried about that. Again, there's definitely the factor of people losing their jobs, which I'm very concerned with. But when you look at, okay, in the grand scheme of things, if the manufacturing plant making tennis balls, right, goes down and never recovers and they shut their doors and they go out of business, it's not as much of an impact to the local community or the world if it's a power plant that goes down or a water treatment facility. Or what about food manufacturing? Start thinking of, yeah, where those impacts are. Again, even today, some owners and operators don't take OT or ICS security seriously. Jaguar and Land Rover obviously didn't. Sorry, but everybody can see what's going on there. You obviously did not take security seriously. And what is that impact? Again, I'm not worried about people, not being able to buy new Jaguars and Land Rovers. I'm worried about people losing their jobs. And what if it is critical infrastructure? So what if it is a power plant? Yeah, if it's the power plant's down for a couple hours, which is kind of easy to do, then yeah, that's okay. We can live, right? Our phones have a charge, you know, we can live for an hour or two without power. What if days become weeks? Last year at this time we had a massive hurricane come where I live. Didn't have most of the area didn't have power for 10 days. I think by the end of those 10 days, like civility was starting to stretch pretty thin. Like if it went any longer, we definitely would have started having some problems. So what happens if you didn't have power for weeks or for months? There are certain attacks you could run against a power plant today that power plant's going to be down for 3 years. What are you going to do then? especially in the massive, push for more power, for more AI. What would you do? Yeah, I'm not trying to be alarmist or make up like these, kind of sci-fi scenarios that these really could happen. But my point is not to necessarily scare people, right? I like to keep it the talk real, but understand there are steps that we need to take to be able to protect our environments. Because realistically, it's not actually hard to protect OT environments. You can master the fundamentals and protect OT or ICS. And again, it doesn't have to be hard. And in a lot of environments, it doesn't have to be expensive either, relatively. I do want to talk a little bit about how attackers get into OT environments. Like in this case, let's say this is it's kind of a power plant, maybe a petrochemical facility. Most attacks come from the IT network. And the vast majority of OT environments today, right, they're connected to IT. And so attackers will get into the IT network and then they'll use the IT network to move into the OT network if that connection is not protected. And unfortunately, most aren't, let alone that a lot of OT environments rely on systems in IT. So if IT goes down, if that plant's not designed appropriately, the plant goes down. So we don't even have to have necessarily an attack against an OT network to take OT down if we can just take IT down. That's what we saw happen like in places like the port of Nagoya, the largest port in Japan, was down for 10 days because the systems that controlled moving containers on and off ships and on and off transportation trucks, those systems were on the IT network. And when IT burned down because of ransomware, ports were down. Most OT or ICS environments are not built with resiliency in mind. The idea with resiliency is if the IT network burns down to the ground, that's okay. The plant is still up and running. Think like Jaguar Land Rover. Not to keep bringing them up, but if they got all their IT network completely burned to the ground with ransomware, why couldn't their plant still be up and running? So most attacks come from IT. We can have what we call transitory cyber assets. It's a fancy name of saying things we bring in and out of the environment, like laptops, right? USB drives, phones. I don't remember the last time I was in an environment that I didn't see somebody's smartphone plugged into like an engineering workstation to charge. Maybe sure that it's instantly charging, but what if that phone's compromised? Or at least that phone is a cellular connection out to the internet. So now you have another bridge for how attackers can get into your environment. We have Wi-Fi and other types of wireless signals that also can be used to get onto the OT network. We can see OT assets like PLCs or programmable logic controllers that get exposed to the internet that attackers could target. We have insider threats. Those are, for me, some of the scariest because if you have somebody that understands how that plan is designed and engineered and how it runs, that's all a real attacker needs to have a true impact. And then supply chain, right? We buy hardware, we buy software and firmware to bring into the environment and then maybe update it from time to time. How do we know that it wasn't compromised when we brought it in and installed it? Or how do we know when we do a new update that it's not going to, that update's not compromised? A lot of us aren't looking for those things. So if you want to learn more about where we're at today from a cybersecurity perspective, I always suggest people read these two annual reports. So Dragos, who is by, considered by most the largest, most mature ICS cybersecurity company out there. Right? Every year, Dragos does their year in review report. And then Verizon also does their year in report. Now that focuses on the IT side. Remember, most attacks come from the IT network. It's important, even if you don't work in IT and you work in OT, but it's important for you to understand what goes on in the IT world. And that can also help you work with your IT team members on the other side of the firewall, if you have one. I always go at least two, and I say everybody needs to read the Dragos report every single year. And I know I have friends that are on the team that write the report. I follow it closely every single year. And it was a huge report this year. And there were some items in there that made me my jaw dropped. I was like, are you kidding? Because Dragos, a lot of what they show is not only, publicly available incidents, which again, in the OT world, we don't have that many. But also Dragos works in some of the world's largest, more mature organizations, which makes what they see even scarier. Because if they're in some of these larger, more mature, OT, ICS environments that have strong OT or ICS cybersecurity programs, and they're seeing these problems a lot, damn, we're all in trouble. Because you can see, and the report talks about things like, yeah, ransomware. And ransomware continues to increase, right? The number of ransomware attacks. Again, either targeting OT or the IT networks that they're attached to. That's why they say, right, against industrial organizations, right? So the company as a whole, right, continues to increase year after year ever since Colonial Pipeline 4 years ago, right? They're seeing more ransomware groups coming on the scene. And then, like we mentioned earlier, that basically 70% of all of the OT related attacks are targeting manufacturing, like JLR. This is where it gets even, I think, more concerning because in all these environments that they're in, and again, this goes to some of the world's largest, more mature cybersecurity programs in OT. It said 65% of those environments had insecure remote conditions. Should be unsecure. People are insecure. Computers are unsecure. 65% had unsecure remote conditions, which means it would have been pretty easy to break into the OT network through the remote access connections, which is really concerning. This is probably even worse. They saw 45% of the customers that used their own network security monitoring tool or platform that they had active SSH connections from the inside of the OT network to the internet. And while I'll give it, some of those connections might have been set up by contractors or engineers. So there's maybe some like legitimate connection. I mean, these shouldn't exist regardless, but okay, I can see maybe some employees or contractors had set those up, maybe with permission. But more than likely, right, most of these are actually attackers with a foothold in the OT network, which again, I just find absolutely staggering. That's a lot. I also gravitated to this where, and this is where I had one of my talks this year at DEF CON, which is where there's now evidence, strong evidence, without a doubt, that supports that state adversaries and hacktivists are converging. What they're showing here is, and I love Dragos and everybody that works there. Like I said, I have many friends that work there. I'm not the biggest fan of the naming convention that they use for their attack groups. I guess I'm not a fan of anybody's, honestly. But what they're showing here is that you have groups like Sandworm in Russia. That's a state adversary group targeting OT and ICS, particularly in the Ukraine, that are aligned with hacktivist groups like the Cyber Army of Russia Reborn. And they basically linked because they were sharing the same YouTube channel, basically. Well, that's not hard to figure out, I guess. And so the main concern is when we talk about, hacktivists and state adversaries, you don't see them very often attack, but when they do, there's a high impact, like creating a blackout for hundreds of thousands of people. Hacktivists, you see a lot of attacks coming from hacktivists, but there's very low impact. You see them all over the place, but they might get in your environment, click around on a interface like an HMI. It's just a GUI if you're not familiar. Just click, click, click to see if they can make something happen. There's an incident where the Cyber Army of Russia Reborn got into a um, kind of water facility for a local community in Texas, in the United States, and they clicked around and they made a couple gallons of water splash out of a tank. And so high volume with hacktivists, right? We see a lot of these attacks, and they let the world know about it, right? But it's very low impact. But what if you now have those state adversaries giving their knowledge and their tools to hacktivists? And that's what we're starting to see happen. Then we start talking about we have high volume, high impact incidents. That is definitely not what anybody is ready for, in the least. So that's why, at the end of the day, why does it matter? And this was a presentation that I had put together for the S4 conference that's coming up in February. So if you're not familiar, S4 is the largest OT ICS cybersecurity conference now. Can talk about, I put this talk together, and Dale Peterson, who, I really appreciate, he takes the time with all the people that submit talks to discuss with them. Um, and he was asking me, he's like, this sounds good from like this perspective. But then he's like, well, you really have to ask yourself, why does it matter that hacktivist and state adversaries are aligning? It's like, it's a good point, because we can say, sure, we still have to make sure we're talking about things like geopolitical considerations, which I've always tried to take out of the conversation, right? Even in IT. And the idea is going to build this new threat model that also incorporates, state adversaries and hacktivists and how they work together. But does it really matter? Because I like to consider myself one of the more practical people in OTICS cybersecurity. Because at the end of the day, does it matter? No, it doesn't, right? I think like a lot of people, or at least guys, maybe, and in the US at least, grew up watching things like James Bond. So things like spy stories, right? I'm very fascinated with, right? And learning about, you know, Russia or China or the Americans or right, and all the things that they've done from a spy perspective. Absolutely fascinating. But as a defender, does it really matter if it's Russia or China, the US that's in my network? No, right? I don't care who you are or where you come from. I just want you gone. If you're not on the network, then you can't have an impact. It's as simple as that. I still find it absolutely fascinating that state adversaries and hacktivists are aligning, and I think that's only going to make things worse on us as defenders. Again, at the end of the day, I don't care who you are. I just want you gone. I did want to talk real quickly because I talk a lot, and I had this conversation I did for the state of South Carolina here in the United States, and the gentleman that runs law enforcement for the state, like, said, I basically scared the living daylights out of him by a similar presentation. And that was not the intent. The intent is to say, yeah, all these bad things are happening, but they don't have to. Again, Jaguar Land Rover did not have to happen. Trisus did not have to happen. Stuxnet and all these other incidents did not have to happen. Because we can take even the most basic security controls, which don't have to even be relatively that expensive to protect OT. Sure, we can talk about organizations that have more significant resources to invest in doing things like risk assessments and network security monitoring, and those are all wonderful things. But if you nail just the basics, you can reduce the vast majority of risk to your environment. I'm not saying like JLR wouldn't happen if they mastered these 5 things, but JLR probably wouldn't happen if they mastered these 5 things. It definitely wouldn't have been as bad. Because I think it's pretty obvious that they don't have good backups of all their systems, and they don't understand how to recover their systems and their processes. If they did, they would have been back up and running by now. It's as easy as that. That's why I have backup and recovery. Number one, every environment is going to get hit. Every environment is going to be compromised. So do you have your backups? Have you tested them? Do you know where they are? Are they secure? If you need to restore something like a PLC, do you have the appropriate like specific version of firmware that was running when it went down? And the logic for that PLC, right? The programming for that PLC to restore if you need to. And if the environments have that, that's where, okay, you get hit and you go down 7, maybe 10 days, you're back up and running. All from a basic, really what's considered, by most an IT control. But we also apply it in OT. We also have to understand what's in the environment to better protect it. Or what if, again, going back to JLR, but we're going to call in these companies to do incident response. They're going to say, okay, well, give us your asset register or your asset inventory so we understand what's in the environment. If you don't have that, you're going to waste so much time trying to figure out what's in the environment and how the attackers got in and what did they do once they got in to bring down the plant. And you're wasting time. A secure network architecture, this is the number one thing you can actually do to reduce your risk the most, is by starting by putting a firewall between your IT network and OT. Because like we mentioned earlier, the vast majority of attacks come from IT. And I asked them, like, what's the one thing I can do to protect an OT network from you? They all tell you the same thing. Put a firewall between IT and OT and configure it appropriately. And if you can make it so IT never talks directly to OT, then you reduce the vast majority of your risk. Now, that's not always possible, but you reduce the vast majority of your risk. Talk about incident response planning. So there we have to be able to understand what's going on out in the threat landscape. That's part of why we're here. Because if I run a manufacturing plant, right, it's a good idea to understand, hey, are there attacks going against petrochemical facilities and power plants? And sure, but it's even more important that I understand what are the attacks happening against manufacturers, especially manufacturers like me. I have one client that's a large car parts manufacturer. I just have to mention JLR, and they're like, we're right with you. We need to understand what's going on. And when we see those types of incidents, we have to ask ourselves, hey, could this happen to us? And if it could happen to us, how do we protect against it? How do we stop it from happening to us? because most of these fixes and most of these security controls, they're not either that complicated, they're not that difficult, and they're relatively not that expensive to deploy. Then I also talk about continuous vulnerability management. So understanding what's in the environment, that goes back to having an asset register and asset management. Understanding what's in the environment. So I know, oh, okay, I have this Siemens PLC running this specific firmware. Does it have a vulnerability or not? And then we can ask ourselves, well, does that vulnerability present a risk to safety or availability? If it presents a real safety issue, we need to fix that right away. Maybe to the point where we bring the plant down to do so. If it's more of an availability or some type of maintenance issue, then we can wait till the next maintenance window, even if that's in 2 or 3 years. If it doesn't impact safety and it doesn't impact availability, then you know what? We'll probably never do anything with it. But we have to have the conversations with the right people that can answer those questions. That's not me, right? We have to have the conversations with the plant operators and the engineers that design the plant, understand how it works. If you can do just those 5 things, you can greatly reduce your risk in the environment. Again, going back to JLR, if they had just done these 5 things, they would have been up and running by now. Yeah, I don't know the particulars, but just from what you see in the news, everything in my gut tells me if you just did these 5 things, you'd be up and running by now. They, I think, massively failed probably at all of these things, and that's why we're seeing what we're seeing today. I know we're almost up against time. The rest of the presentation was just going back and talking about Frosty Group. Remember where the Russians turn off heating in those 600 apartment buildings. And what this is showing is this is just some of the research that Dragos had done. They had actually discovered Frosty Goop, and here's like a little, it shows like a Wireshark capture of Modbus traffic associated with Frosty Goop. What this is actually just showing is that you could use Frosty Goop, the malware, to reconnect to a PLC or a controller and read and write registers. So you can store data in these coils and registers. In this case, it was just focused on registers. Right? And this register stored values between 0 and 65,535. So if you think of storing something like a temperature, right, you would store it in a register. And then, well, what if I updated that value? And it's really easy to do because Modbus is an unauthenticated protocol. You're never asked for a username or password. You can just tell it to do whatever you want. As long as it's capable of doing it and you understand how it's programmed, then you can have an impact in the real world, which is what the attackers did in this case. And where I'm going with this is you can take, I got permission, I think this was DEF CON year before last, where I got Rob Lee's permission. Rob co-founded and he's the CEO of Dragos to talk about the research that because they had just released it and basically do a demo where you can take the research that Dragos did. This is where you can see where the attackers came in, found the controller that reads all the sensor data for the temperatures throughout the building. That they manipulated that controller to the point where, again, heating was off for 2 days. It took the people that were running heating for those 600 apartment buildings 2 days to figure out what was going on. That's what really happened. But I went back and recreated that tool using the Dragos research with ChatGPT in like 15 minutes or less to do the whole thing. So you had an actual tool using their verbiage. Now mine was a Python script. They had a compiled Go piece of Go language, and they called it modbus.exe. That's the only difference. But here you can see in like the top screen, I call it snow crash. Frosty Goop's not the greatest name. I've heard a lot of bad jokes about it. Say, oh, give it an IP address to connect to. I can tell, am I reading, am I writing? If I'm writing, if I'm making an update, then which register am I going to update? So in this case, it's the 6th register on the controller. They're zero-based numbering. And then I'm going to change that value to 20. Maybe the value previously was 72, like in the United States for Fahrenheit, that's the desired room temperature. If I set it to 20, it basically, that's like turning the heating off. I could recreate that really quickly using ChatGPT or Gemini or whichever, Gen AI platform that you want. All from their research. This was not, again, a sophisticated tool. That's why I did this. It is a very simple tool. It's a very simple attack. And at the same time, they turned off the power for 600 apartment buildings in the middle of winter with sub-zero temperatures outside. And it's very, I don't say, it's a very American thing to sit here and say, that's on the other side of the planet. Whoop-de-doo. What do you mean, whoop-de-doo? I mean, that could happen here. That could happen in any of the places that any of us live. We have to stop being like, oh yeah, it's on the other side of the planet. Or the internet brings us all together. And we all have different adversaries. And there are, again, it's not just state adversaries these days. That's the small number of attackers. It's the ransomware group operators and the hacktivists and the script kiddies that are all coming for OT and ICS environments today. Again, the number of attacks and the number of environments getting hit is only continuing to increase. And there's more and more evidence that there are cyber attacks happening that are creating things like explosions that aren't labeled as cyber attacks. I think that story is going to really play out over the next year or two, maybe even less. It'll be really interesting to see what comes next. I'm going to skip over the last couple pages, but that was really just how we can find these different systems that are connected to the internet, even. Again, we don't want to have our worst day end up on the news, right? We don't want an explosion at that petrochemical facility. I don't want JLR to go down and potentially put 200,000 people at risk for losing their jobs, let alone all the fallout for the people that run things like restaurants and pubs in those areas. It's a significant impact. Well, I'm really passionate about that. One of the reasons again why I do what I do on LinkedIn and YouTube is to connect people with jobs. And JLR is not doing that right now. And it's a true shame. Because again, we can follow those 5 basic fundamentals and reduce that risk significantly. So again, when we talk about low impact, high impact, like I don't care who you are, where you're coming from, right? If you're Russia, China, the United States, if you're a ransomware group operator, if you're a hacktivist, if you're a script kiddie, if you're a security researcher, I should put that in quotes, right? I don't care. I just want you off my network. Right? If you're not on my network in the first place, there's no impact. Period. The end. There's no explosion. Factories are up and running. We have clean water. We have power. We have food to eat. Again, it's not hard to keep attackers off OT networks, but you do have to at least implement some of the basics. But it is not hard to defend these environments. It just takes awareness and education, the time to learn. So I appreciate everybody's time and being here for going through the presentation really again on where we're at today with OT and ICS cybersecurity. And again, that's really at the heart of why I do what I do on LinkedIn and YouTube, and why I'm here to share with everybody today. Because we need more people, whether you want to get interested and learn more about being an OT ICS cybersecurity, because we need more and more people. Or if you're like some of my clients when in my site consulting, where you're just starting to build an OT cybersecurity program, or maybe you have one and you're still trying to figure out what to do next. That's the things I love to do. So, but if we're not connected on LinkedIn, that's where you can find me. So feel free to reach out anytime. Go to MikeHolcomb.com. It has links to LinkedIn and my YouTube channel, and there's my email address. Feel free to email me either. LinkedIn is usually probably the best. I'm always there. And then I have a bunch of resources on GitHub as well. So, but again, I really appreciate everybody's time, and thank you. So, and then I'll turn it back over to Rakesh.
Thank you, Mike, so much for your time and the precious knowledge. Last thing which you told people to join your LinkedIn, I am sure that there is no one here who is not connected to you on the LinkedIn here. All right. So
Oh
next
no, I can't
thing,
hear you, Rakesh. I don't know if it's just me.
guys, just give a thumbs up if you can hear me. I think yeah, everyone can hear me. Mike, there are a lot of thumbs up. Just change your speaker setting. Probably you'll be able to hear me. You're on mute, Mike. Meanwhile, to the audience, we will take the question answer session. Uh, just allow me 10-15 minutes of my presentation, and after that, we can continue with the question answer session with Mike. Uh, he has asked the question, what next? I would like to present what is the next. And I promise that there will be some announcement uh, in this session, particularly for the people who are there in the session. So, shall I start it? I just need one more thumbs up from you and then I'll start. All right. Windows. Okay, presentation. Mimuna, just one thing. I have to share the screen or the PPT. All right, no worries. Let me share the screen for now. If you guys can see the screen, just give one more thumbs up and then I'll start from there. All right, great. I'll start with this. So, ICE. What's your next step with ICE? That's what I would be presenting it, which are the next training and more details about training. Before that, I would like to just go to a recap our journey so far. So we initially started with Industrial OT Cybersecurity Foundation Training 1, a 2 days training. You can see the picture of the training here. Then it was hands-on experience on the lab shock by Zucker. Third, it was the Industrial OT Cybersecurity Foundation 2 training. Then we have done the similar training in Arabic version. And the current one, which presently we are doing, is part 3 of Industrial OT Cybersecurity training. Before going, I would like to just thank you all the people who has basically given us positive feedback from all the global participants, the comments, the appreciation received from the audience, and the engagement. I just put some of the screenshot here of the people who has praised our work, the delivery, the knowledge we have shared, and it's great to uh, receive this kind of appreciation. Now, with this, thank you so much, everyone. You have rated us 4.67 in providing these trainings. Thank you so much. Now I'll come to the slide where I'll be talking about what's coming in future. We are talking about training, getting started with OT cybersecurity, a boot camp. Uh, this training will be delivered by Mike and Shiv. Uh, Mike, if you can talk about these points, over to you for some.
Sure.
Mike, are
Yeah.
you there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Good. Good. Yeah. Yeah. So the idea was to put a workshop together for everyone to talk about OT ICS cybersecurity. And this is, pretty much what we were just talking about as far as, covering not only the basics of how OT ICS environments work, to understand the basics of how do we secure these environments, right? So we talk about those first five controls that we looked at from the BASIC, the basic, but then also looking at additional controls as well, like network security monitoring, risk assessments, and that's how you can get to really being a world-class OT cybersecurity environment. Even though, again, it doesn't necessarily have to be that expensive for a lot of these controls. Now, risk assessments, if you're bringing somebody in or if you're deploying network security monitoring, right, there's sure significant costs in doing those. But when you look at, going back to the mastering those fundamentals, right, how do we keep attackers off the network, or how do we limit damage if they were able to gain that foothold? And then a lot of us will look to 62443 as the gold standard to help us understand how to protect our environment. And that's what Shiv's actually going to talk about for the last part of the workshop.
Shiv,
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for giving the overview, and
thank
thanks,
you,
Chris, for
Mike.
putting
Yeah.
this up. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I would be specifically taking the 62443 path, which is a quite good Kickstarter or getting started with the standard, and knowing what is the series of documents and how you can use different roles that you are playing in your organization, whether you are an asset owner or a consultant or a system integrator, or basically somebody who is curious about the standard. We'll try to cover these different sections of the standard into 4 to 5 hours time, which will give you a working knowledge about 62443, which is the gold standard for cybersecurity. Post this section that Mike would have taken to give you initial footsteps into the OT cybersecurity world. Yeah. So overall, it will be a good mixture of 16-hour long boot camp that will help you kickstart your journey in ICS OT cybersecurity. Yeah, over to you, Rakesh.
Yeah, thank you for explaining both the session, Mike and Shiv. Thank you. Now, the thing which I have announced here, I have supposed to announce here is uh, the cost of this training. So, usually such kind of training, integrated training of 16 hours with the hands-on lab activities and certification and live question and answers, such kind of activities globally, it is priced around $1,000 plus. We are keeping this training reasonable for our audience, so that it is reachable by most of the people who are following us. And we are keeping a price of $299 for this. Further, there is one thing we are doing, a special offer which will be valid for next 4 hours after this session ends. Not now, after this session ends. And the price, the special price is $149. Okay. Now I'll keep my promise. I have promised that there is a offer for the people who are attending this session specifically. So for those particular people, there is a no-brainer offer for this training, but you have to act very fast on this. Talking about the price, it's not 1,000, it's not 299, it's not 149. This is a special offer valid for this session only for the first 15 participants who will join, who will confirm this. And the price is $79. Now, it's valid for first 15 people, and afterwards it will be 149. I'm starting the timer, let's say for half an hour. There is a barcode over here. Once you scan it, you'll see the training details. You can scan, click the link, fill the details, confirm the payment, and you're done. Mike and Shiv, you have some questions from the previous session which you can attend. Meanwhile, I'll just share the screen here for the.
Sure. Yeah, no, that sounds good. I think I see. So I'm getting used to go to webinar. And sorry, yeah, I didn't have sound issues. I couldn't hear you earlier, but um, trying to scroll back to the beginning, and then maybe Shiv and I can look at these together. Let me. Okay, I think I'm back at the bottom. Um, the first question I see is talks about someone with 6+ years of experience in IT and OT. I think 3.5 being an OT. I'm a little bit curious to know which one is the best career path, IT or OT security, and where can we get the higher salary, which is a fair question. So I for me, I always say, the best path is what you enjoy the most. Of course, I started in IT cybersecurity. It's something I've done for 30+ years. But when I found OT security back in 2010, that was definitely, I knew my true love. And but I think what we see people coming into OT or ICS cybersecurity today, they can come from both IT and from OT. So you can see people from, especially an IT cybersecurity background, like myself, or you have people that come from OT, so people like engineers and operators and PLC technicians, right? That all of them, come together to learn about cybersecurity and how to secure these environments. So, yeah, it doesn't matter if you're from IT or OT. Anybody can do this. If I can do this, anybody can. So yeah, I'm from IT cybersecurity background. Of course, you have Shiv, who comes from an engineering background. Again, if we can do it, anybody can. As far as the higher salaries still today typically tend to be in IT cybersecurity. OT cybersecurity is a little bit behind on salaries. That is changing. I would say, even over the next couple of years, they will be on par. But right now, OT is still a little bit behind, unfortunately, for salaries. So, but hopefully that answers the question. So.
Yeah, Mike, one thing, thanks so much for answering this question. There are so many people who are asking me for the date, which I missed to mention. The date is November 15, the training session. the boot camp scheduled to be on November 15, which is a Saturday, purposefully kept so that we can spare the time for the training. Then second session, it will be in three sessions. Session one will be on November 15, two will be November 22, and the third will be on November 29. So November 15, November 22, November 29. Over to you, Mike, if there is any more questions. Meanwhile,
Okay.
people can scan here. I see that there are 2 registrations received already. Thank you, the first 2 gentlemen, and congratulations. Welcome to this session. Over to Mike. Continue.
Okay. Yeah, no, I appreciate folks for joining and signing up. Let's see this question, and I don't know, Shiv, if you want to take this one, or I figure we could take turns. But the next question I saw was, with the rising trends of cyber attacks, specifically on SIS, shouldn't we switch back to conventional relay logic architecture? Or if not, I can take that one. From a cybersecurity perspective, it would be awesome if we could. But unfortunately, the world we live in today is everything has moved in OT and ICS to Ethernet, and we see Windows machines everywhere, and a lot of that, we talk sometimes about IT and OT convergence, because it makes life easier on the operators, and it makes administration and operation of the plant much easier, right? So it's kind of that traditional conversation between convenience and security. And unfortunately, we've just moved very quickly in OT ICS towards convenience. And I get that, right? If I'm the business, right, I want to make sure that everything is running, right? And I want to do it as quickly as possible. I want to do it as cheaply as possible. I want to make it convenient for my operators and the people running the plant. So, it's unfortunately, yeah, it's just not a question anymore. It would be better for security, sure, but we're long past that point. I think the problem where we're at today is where we're adding things like cloud and AI pretty quickly to these environments as well. We're just not ready to secure those kind of newer technologies for the vast majority of environments. So I hope that answers that question, though. So I think somebody, maybe I'll start with the newer ones, talking about the date. So the first one is going to be, so I'm going to be doing the first 2 sessions. So that's November 15th and November 22nd. And then Shiv is going to be doing November 29th. That's actually a holiday here in the United States. So that basically, so that worked out really, really, really well. So so hopefully that works. So it's basically the last 3 Saturdays of November. So Sumit asked, how easy or difficult is it for someone like me, who's always worked in process instrumentation sales for 10 years, to get into OT cybersecurity domain with CompTIA Network Plus and Security Plus training, along with the bootcamp training, which is arranged by ICE? I am looking for a entry-level job in OT cybersecurity. Yeah, I think it's a great start. I mean, that was kind of the idea behind putting the workshop together and making it a boot camp. So you already have Network Plus, Security Plus. Those are the fundamentals that I tell everybody to get, whether they come from IT cybersecurity, whether they come from OT, right? So you understand the basics of how things like networking, actually works. You understand the basics of cybersecurity fundamentals. Now I just need to understand, right? And with your background, you already have a good understanding probably of how OT ICS environments work and the different types of systems in those environments. So then it's just a matter of then understanding, well, how do we secure them? And IT cybersecurity and OT cybersecurity have more in common than they don't, which I think a lot of people don't realize. And what you'll see is that what you need to focus on coming from OT is to understand, well, where are IT cybersecurity and OT cybersecurity different, and be able to focus there, right? To be able to focus on those differences, because some are very different. Like vulnerability management, like we mentioned in the presentation, that's very different in OT than in IT, where there are other aspects that are very similar. Like incident response at a high level, very similar. So, but hopefully answers your question there. So, um, I have a decade of experience in control systems and automation, but in OT, I'm a newbie. Does it require, I think for the workshop, does it require, the workshop require any prerequisites? No, it doesn't, right? It's really meant for folks, whether you come from IT or OT, right, to build that knowledge from scratch. So, when people come from IT, right, they have, a good understanding of, sure, how IT works. If you understand IT cybersecurity, you understand that portion, but you probably don't understand much about OT. If you come from OT, right, as an engineer or PLC tech or some other type of somebody working in operations, then you understand that, but not the basics of cybersecurity, and you need to learn, how do we apply cybersecurity to protect OT. So yeah, so the workshop, it doesn't matter if you come from IT or OT, right? It really helps you build that knowledge from really the beginning. Now, I'd say for people that don't have any IT or OT experience, then there's definitely some prerequisites people would need to meet. But as long as you're in IT or OT today, I mean that's pretty much the prerequisite for the workshop for sure. So
So, Mike, I got tempted to answer one of the questions. Somebody asked,
sure.
which is the best solution for cybersecurity in OT? And that's as is shows that the curiosity in the participant, and that's what we are going to discuss in this boot camp. That cybersecurity is not a silver bullet that you could fix with one solution. No solution is perfect. It's a mixture of multiple layers of defense, and you need to understand what is your environment that you are operating into. Uh, the solution that you might have heard, they might not be necessary for your environment at all if you don't have that kind of risk. I had actually consulted one of the customer who was a food and beverage customer, and what he had is air gapped systems for mixing and then blending kind of systems, which is PLC and an embedded HMI. They did not even have an engineering station to be used very frequently. So the solution that we traditionally see, which sits on much more network converged, uh, passive network identification and those kind of things, might not be necessary for these kind of ICS operators, because the risk is not very high. So yeah, no solution is perfect and no solution is the best solution. You need to basically identify what are your risks and then decide which solution is going to suit you best for your cybersecurity requirement.
Yeah, no, all good. Yeah, no, thanks for answering that one. I found another one from is it Junaid? Sorry for the American pronunciation. I'm trying not to butcher butcher people's names, but uh, apart from the IEC certification program, what other certifications are recommended for OT cybersecurity professionals? Yeah, there's really only two. I mean, there's two main paths that people look to for OT cybersecurity certification, and one is through ISA IEC for 62443, and that's comprised of 4 courses, and you have to take those courses to be able to take the 4 exams. And that gets you what they call the ISA 62443 cybersecurity expert. I hate the the title, because you're not an expert after, like, 2 weeks of classes. It just doesn't make sense. But that is the most cost effective, because those courses are about $1,600 US without an ISA member discount. I think you get about 10-15% off if you're a member. So become a member, it pays for itself. The other main option is SANS, which SANS has great training. I'm friends with all the instructors; they're all great people. Um, they're just very expensive courses. One class to take a class and an exam is $11,000 basically US. That's a lot. That's a lot of money. Um, so, um, so those are the two main kind of tracks people typically will go, whether depending on how many resources they have, especially from their organization. I will also say, so CompTIA has SecOT Plus coming out next year, which is going to debut probably June, July in beta. So they are literally just meeting this week, starting tomorrow or starting Monday, to start building that course or the exam. So yeah, so CompTIA will have like their entry level OT security cybersecurity certification, which is really cool. So I'm really excited about that. There are some other engineering related companies out there that also have some basic cybersecurity certifications like Exida, TÜV out of Germany. Those are others that I see like, in my day job, in the engineering world, but most people don't recognize those outside of like the engineering firms. So if you're really looking at OT, ICS, cybersecurity certifications, you really want to look at either ISA, IEC, the 62443, or SANS. And again, a lot of that usually just comes down to the cost and affordability. So, but yeah, hopefully that helps answer that question. Do you want to do another one, Shiv?
Yeah, sure. So, okay, so I see a question by Mustafa. How can I secure the IoT ICT network? Should collect all the logs to the SIEM and have a SOC team. Another part, the logs from the IoT are not normalized. So, yeah, you're coming from your security monitoring perspective, but before getting into your monitoring part, Mustafa, you need to build multiple different things. First is the convergence of the network, and then also hardening the devices and finding out other compensating countermeasures. So yeah, we will discuss these kind of things, defense in depth concept, and different areas of cybersecurity that you would improve, built upon each of these layers, and then ultimately get into the continuous monitoring mode. If your logs are not normalized, then you could use some log parser application which could normalize it and then bring it into the template that your SIEM is understanding. Typically, the solution that I see on the passive network side, they are SIEM friendly. So you could collect that as a syslog format and then send it to your SIEM. And that's where you would basically correlate your SIEM log and your uh, other network IDs, endpoint devices logs together to correlate and then do the security operations. Yeah, I hope that answers.
Yeah, I think that definitely hits some of the highlights
Yeah.
for sure. There's another question I see so for continuous system and network monitoring of OT systems, what are the major differences between Nozomi, Dragos, and FireEye? And are they mostly similar, or are there any major differences? Yeah, and I would say, um, yeah, so Dragos, Nozomi, Clarity, those are probably the big three network security monitoring platforms that are out there. FireEye, which became Mandiant, which became Google, they don't really factor in. But yeah, so Dragos, Nozomi, and Clarity, they're kind of considered the big three. Even Rob Lee, who again he co-founded and runs Dragos, he'll tell you that, and from what I've seen, um, they're all kind of, relatively the same as far as functionality. Um, and so, sure, some have little, features that, the others don't. Like Dragos, they have a much stronger threat intel program that they build into their platform, right? That just Nozomi and Clarity just can't touch, because that's one of those things that Dragos really excels at, right? And then, Nozomi will be interesting because were just bought by Mitsubishi. So they were bought by a vendor. So I'd be kind of curious. Those types of acquisitions usually don't work out really well for the customer. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Nozomi over the next couple of years. But yeah, I think from a functionality perspective, they're all about the same. I think a lot of people then just look to kind of how they work with the company and if the companies offer other solutions that they could take advantage of. Some like if you're looking for a company that also does pen testing and cyber threat intel, you probably would lean towards Dragos rather than the other ones. So, but that would just be an example. I'm not necessarily trying to sell anybody on Dragos. I don't have a referral program with them, even though you can tell I'm a big fan. And like I said, I mean, I have friends that work at all of these companies, but yeah, I've just really appreciated all the work that Rob and the folks at Dragos have done, even just for the community. So, take another one, Shiv.
Yeah. So I see a question by Varun. Is it appropriate to assign the CISO to own the OT security? If not, who is ideal? So CISO as a role is a leadership role which is responsible for overall cybersecurity of the organization, whether it is IT, OT, IoT, cloud, whatever you could say. So yeah, of course, he would be the ultimate owner and responsible for the security. Some organizations differentiate this with different roles, but typically CISO is the one who would be the ultimate responsible guy. And below the CISO, there could be a leadership role, which could be OT security lead, OT security director, those kind of roles which could be created in the organization. Uh, but yeah, generally, the one single role who would be responsible is the CISO.
For sure, for sure. Um,
I would like to say
let's
one. I'd like to address one question, and then we'll back to you, Mike and Shiv.
Okay, sure.
There are so many questions related to the upcoming OT Cybersecurity Bootcamp, the one which you're talking. So I see that there are some people who are facing some issue, but don't worry. Since you have message here, this offer will be valid for you. And after this session, we will individually take all the messages whoever having a trouble, and we'll give you the access in the same offer. So don't worry
So
for that. And yeah,
I see you are extending that 15 count to maybe 50 now.
uh, which one, Shiv?
The initial 15 count. I got a
Ah,
message that the initial 15 slots are already booked. So you're basically going to extend that to more people since they are not able to make it.
actually, by the time I was talking and passing this, delivering this message, already 15 were over. Okay, and that is why to keep my commitment, I promise that whoever is present in this session, the audience in this session, will get this offer. I am extending it. I've asked Mimuna to keep the options open. Thank you guys. Thank you so much for sharing your love here. If there is any question regarding this particular session, the upcoming one, I will address it one by one after this session. You will get it. And there are some payments which are failed. Some people are not able to register it. Don't worry, your seats are reserved, and I will resolve the technical issue in the backend, and you will get the confirmation. Over to you, Mike and Shiv.
Okay. One of the newer questions that came in was, is there any training on industrial communication vulnerabilities, like as in are current protocols compatible with current threats? So I would say, like in the workshop that we're doing, so the last couple of hours of my portion before we get to show 62443 material will be more around pen testing, right? So looking at how attackers break into and manipulate, how they get into OT environments, how they then begin to understand what's in the environment and how they can eventually have an impact to the process. And so part of that is looking at some of those protocols like Modbus, S7, DMP3, BACnet. So those are the common ones that we'll spend most of the time in the workshop with Modbus, but we'll touch on the other ones as well. So you'll see some of the risk with those, like we mentioned earlier, that with the Frosty Goop attack, why it was so easy and why it was so successful was that those controllers use Modbus as the communication protocol, which is unauthenticated. And if you don't have a username or password that you're asked for, then you can just connect and you can just start issuing it commands. So you still have to learn, and understand how that controller is programmed and what those values you're looking at actually mean. But especially in an environment where you're talking about controlling heating for an apartment building or 600 of them, that it's typically not that hard to figure out. So, but yeah, we'll be talking about some of that in the workshops for sure. Definitely. Another one,
Mike, I
Shin?
see there is one question to you, but I kept it open. Uh, Specifically asked, hi Mike, could you please brief about TUV SUD certifications on OT security? Uh,
The which
so yeah,
the which certification?
this certification body, TUV SUD,
Oh
uh,
yeah, yeah, too. Yeah, those were
TUSUD.
the folks I mentioned, yeah, earlier. So they're based out of Germany. It's very similar to Exida. I think they're an engineering company that then started doing training and then offering certification exams. So we do so at my office we have 4,000 electrical and control system engineers. There's a few people that have those certifications. I think you can actually look at their site and see the actual people that have their certification, and I think there's like 500 people globally that are certified. So I think it's good training between Tuve and Exida. And I think most people, I think like if you're in North America, you would probably pick Exida, and if you're in Europe, you probably pick Tuve. Realistically, is usually how it works. But if you work in like in engineering, they're valid courses and certifications. I have not taken the TUV or the Exida courses or exams. I've taken all the ISA ones. I've taken all the SANS ones. So I've been very fortunate there. So I can't tell you what TUV or Exida looks like. I talk with engineers, that and understanding, what they look like. They sound to me like they're very similar to the ISA IEC 62443 courses. So realistically,
Yeah.
so
So I have one experience, Mike, maybe I would like to add. I know a couple of
sure.
friends and colleagues who has taken this TUV TUSUD
Mhm.
certification. So it's basically, the key difference between certification from this established organization like ISA and JAC versus the other organization you are doing is these organizations are globally established organization and their value is in the certification itself, not in the training part. Uh, Whereas the other players like Tosud or anybody else, these guys primarily will focus on skill part, not the certification itself. So there may be very less value compared to if you have ISA certified or GIAC certified certification holder, but you will get really good skills. And of course, the certification is kind of shows that you have gone through the path and then you learned something out of it. So that's what my take with the two SUD certificates. They are not very much, uh, detailed. They are concised, miniature form of 62443. Maybe they will do 2-day course and then concise everything into it. Not like a elaborate course like possibly 2 weeks of 62443 courses. Uh, uh, if you do all four of them. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, good to know. No, I appreciate you sharing that for sure. Um, let's see. A lot of certification questions. I'm actually doing a session Tuesday on survey. Always lots of questions around certs. Um, let's see. Please tell about which certification for IT and OT covers both. there isn't anything that covers both. So when you're looking at IT cybersecurity certifications, yeah, they speak to just IT cybersecurity. If you're looking at OT cybersecurity, they speak to just OT cybersecurity, right? Is there crossover between the two? Sure. And that's what I was mentioning. IT and OT have much more in common than they don't, but they can also be very different in certain areas. And so it's important to understand where they're different. Because if you don't, that's where you run the risk of you could get somebody hurt, you could get somebody killed, right? Or you could bring a plant down. And so, yeah, it's important to understand the differences. But yeah, they are, especially from a certification standpoint, they're very different because they are different. Yeah, but there is, again, there's a lot of crossover for sure.
I see one question by uh, a person. His name is John Delphi, and I think he's the person who is the first registrant in your course also, Rakesh. So his question is, he's from Mauritius, and he says that people don't even know what is OT in his country. And I'm the first guy in my company who has the title, please, how to make management understand the importance. Yeah, so John, bring them to our boot camp. They will have some awareness and then they will know what is OT. That's the easiest way. Yeah, but yeah, understanding the importance is very important, as you rightly identified. We need to show the threat landscape and uh, the weaknesses of the system that they are sitting on. If they are not recognizing it, it could be a big incident that they are sitting on. So in cybersecurity, we say generally that either you know that you are compromised, or otherwise is you are compromised and you don't know. So that's how cybersecurity is basically is. It's not like that people are secure and they are not aware. They don't want to talk about it. It's about awareness. Uh, so yeah, that's how they should be. Or you could basically point out some of the Mike's video or my video available on YouTube, which basically talks about awareness part, and that's when they will start listening to you about what is OT security and why it is important for the company to understand it.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing that's always helped me, well, two things really is one, and really I did it, in the beginning of the presentation today, is if you can get to where you can just tell the story of what's happened in an incident, I think that connects with a lot more people than especially executives than trying to just throw out a bunch of technical terms or like, oh, we have to do something for OT cybersecurity because we have to. That's not going to work. That's not going to connect. But if you can tell that story, then that's when they'll actually listen. And then the other thing is where you find examples of incidents in other environments like your own. So again, I mentioned like with Jaguar Land Rover, that's a perfect example for me to use with any of my clients that work in auto manufacturing, whether they're, building cars or they're, manufacturing parts to then go into cars. But that is something that it hits very close to them, right? It's very close to home. And then they can also learn, right, from those incidents to understand, hey, oh, this happened to someone that's just like us. Well, could this happen to us too? And then if so, what can we do to protect against it? If you can have those conversations, that goes a long way with the executives. And those are the kind of conversations where they start asking you, okay, well, let's make some budget for this and let's help you, start to take some steps to implement cybersecurity in the environment.
Yeah.
You want to take another one?
Yeah, so I see one question by Amar Kahani. Which maturity assessment will be relevant for most OT ISES, whether it is ECF, NIST, or CISA? Um, so, if you are aware of the recent version of 62443-2-1, it covers the cybersecurity program and governance in good uh, depth. So that could also be the one that you could use, or you could put up your own based on the NIST 882 guidelines and possibly NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2.0. That could be a good starting point. But the 2-1, which is released last year, it directly talks about uh, the auditability of the standard. So, in my opinion, that would be a good starting point that will give you OT specific understanding with maturity levels attached to it. So, you could use the maturity level guidance explained within the standard itself. So, yeah, I would go for that if I have to do that. But yeah, these maturity assessments are basically also depends on your journey of cybersecurity, where you are currently, whether it is the first time that you are starting or you already have a cybersecurity program being put up into place and you want to audit it. So, yeah, if you have a program already, then you already have a decision being made. But I think since you are asking this question, you are just kickstarting your journey. And for kickstarting, NIST could be a good starting point because it's a free document, you could access it. And slightly when you build the program, then 624432-1 could be good.
Yeah, no, all good. Let's see, there's a question. This one kind of jumped out because I was just actually talking with some of these folks. So may I ask how platforms like Try Hack Me and Hack the Box can help a beginner who is in OT cybersecurity? So for folks that aren't familiar, Hack the Box and Try Hack Me are online platforms that are designed primarily to help people understand different aspects of cybersecurity. Hack the Box is mostly virtual environments that they design to be hacked. So you learn offensive security skills. And then they started to do also defensive as well, but still primarily offensive. And then Try Hack Me is very kind of similar, but different in the way they implement it. And then they have offensive and defensive tracks to help people learn and get hands-on skills. So everything from sure I want to be a penetration tester to also doing a how to work in a SOC, right, and do be a security analyst. So Hack the Box right now, they actually have a premium room that they built with Dragos, so Rob Lee's company, which simulates a brewery. And so it's very detailed and it's real world. It's like $50, I think, a month. Well worth it if you have the time to invest and learn how to do the attacks there. They don't really give you a lot of help though, so it's rough from that perspective. They have a few other rooms, but they're not like the first one they do is like around like protocol dissection, but I've looked at it. I don't know like the purpose of it as far as like what you're learning. I don't know. It just seems kind of strange to me. Just obviously being very transparent here. um, and Try Hack Me doesn't really. Try Hack Me has two rooms today where they simulate a bottle factory and they allow you to manipulate the bottle factory so you can see how you could break down the factory over time. And then I am talking with them actually right now to build out an OT cybersecurity track. So kind of along the lines of what we're going to be talking about in the boot camp, and then they'll have like different simulated environments to be able to test with. So honestly, like try Hack the Box. They do have that alchemy room that you can pay like $50 a month for, which is really detailed if you have the time and resources to work on it. I would consider it intermediate to advanced. Um, and Try Hack Me has those two rooms right now, which is a good start. But hopefully we'll have uh, something, probably, by the beginning of next year. Um, if yeah, we can build something there. So I'm really excited about that.
Okay, so
We can address one or two questions, and it's about 2 hours. So yeah, maximum one or two questions we can address.
Okay.
Shiv and I just need to do our own episode.
Yeah. Okay, so I see a question by Junaid. It's a longer one. For power plants which have obsolete control systems on OT but are still connected to corporate IT network, properly segmented with either firewall or data diode, if sufficient countermeasures are put in place, can the overall risk be made low, or is an upgradation a must to bring risk down to low? Very good question, actually. Yeah, that's the confusion that I generally see people that what is sufficient for the legacy hardware. So this is basically again is coming from that you know that there are risks, and then you are putting the compensating countermeasures with the boundary where you could have the mixture of IT/OT, uh, the connectivity between your IT/OT to take data and send data, and minimizing the risk of the attack coming in from your IT side through data dive. So it makes sense over there. It will definitely reduce the risk. But apart from this one connectivity that is there from your um, IT side to OT side, there could be other reasons your plant equipment can fail due to out of life. You don't have some of the systems which are hardware compatible. And cybersecurity is not about these digital risks that you are having. It could also be availability risk due to hardware failure or due to uh, you cannot upgrade the system at all. Those kind of challenges. So yeah, it is one of the countermeasure that you could implement, but then you need to see the holistic picture. That with this legacy, do you have space available? How long you would be able to sustain? If something breaks, would you be able to replace that in time? Those kind of questions you need to answer to bring down the overall risk to acceptable level.
So good. The last one, I guess, we'll look at talks about what are the points to be considered during detail engineering stage when reviewing various packages, which are having small control panels and interface with plant control systems through serial interfaces. Do we need to ask every package vendor to comply with cybersecurity requirements as per 62443? It goes on pretty long, but yeah, I can tell you, like, for us in my day job, we do require all contractors to follow 62443. So our program and controls are based off of 62443. Ultimately, the requirements actually are based off of the client's requirements, because if you think the more we do for security, the more cost you're going to incur. So at the end of the day, it's really a client decision. Um, but so you'll definitely want to check with your client and what they're desiring. But we do require all contractors, consultants, OEMs, integrators to follow 62443 as the basis for cybersecurity through any of our projects. And kind of, in your position, like in many of mine, projects, it's really nice and effective to be able to be in there in those initial design and engineering conversations. So you're building cybersecurity into those designs, and you're not, waiting 15 years after you've built the plant to then come and try to bolt on cybersecurity after the fact. Right? It just doesn't work. So, but yeah, I know there's a lot more there, but hopefully that at a high level kind of answers the question. And we need to wrap up. But yeah, I appreciate the time and everybody for listening in. Rakesh, thanks for putting this together, and Shiv, thanks for being here. It's good seeing you. It's always good to.
Yeah, yeah,
It's fun to sit here and answer questions together.
We
yeah,
we
yeah.
will
That's
have
true.
such sessions in our boot camp. Here there are some questions which we are not able to answer. So in the boot camp, we will see that we answer each and every question in detail so that people learn from others' question, and that will be one of the beauty of our boot camp. So yes, thank you, Mike, and thank you, Shiv, for this contribution. A quick one, future announcement that next year, early next year, we will be having because there were some questions about the training. So we will be having role specific trainings and a boot camp for 62443. We will announce more details later, but yeah, let's have this boot camp first. And thank you so much everyone who joined. And if there is any question regarding this training, we have put the email ID here in the chat. You can ask the questions there, and you'll get the answer. Signing up for now. Goodbye. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Mike.